This is fun. Isn't it awesome to be a part of a church? We're going to just outrageous Christmas like that. It's just incredible. And it's good to see you guys. As Wes said, my name is Brian. I just get the amazing opportunity of leading with the next wave. So high schoolers, junior high, and then kids, which is incredible. And God's just doing amazing things through you in New Life with the next wave. And I just have a challenge for us as a church this Christmas season. Will you be praying for the next wave? I just know that part of my story of being up here is just that there was parents who specifically prayed for me as a 15-year-old to say, you know what, like he's going to get to share his story and God's just going to do incredible things in his life. And I have such a heart for what God is doing in students and elementary age kids. And so this Christmas season, when you're with your family or whatever, you just be praying for the next wave because I believe God is going to do way bigger things through them. So awesome. I'm glad you're here this morning. We are going to kind of jump into this series that we're in. We're in a series called Hope. And I'm just going to kind of recap the last couple weeks and get you caught up to speed. We're talking about hope specifically in your life. Hope specifically in your life. And let's pretend this is your life here. We said the first week that hope begins when you start with prayer. And prayer is ask. It's ask, seek, not. And that's what Jesus tells us to do. And so we start in prayer. But there's moments in life that are good. There's moments in our life and our story that are good moments. You get a job, you have a career, or a birth of a child, you have a kid, or a new home or a house. It's a good moment. You won Dancing with the Stars. That's incredible. Good for you. You've got some rhythm, so that's awesome. But there's other moments in our life that aren't good, that are really difficult. There's loss, and there's abuse, or even like a death of a family member or a close friend, or even just seasons of depression can be just really difficult, and there are downswing turns in our life. But we said this, is that what starts in prayer ends in praise. Starts in prayer, ends in praise. That God's doing things through your story, through the good moments and the bad, and we get to end in thanksgiving saying, God, you are good, and I know you have a plan for my life, and that faith is what carries our hope. Faith is what carries our hope through our story. And so we're going to pick up on that this morning. But I believe this. I think that sometimes hope gets a little bit of a bad rap. Hope can be a little bit hard to kind of believe or put our trust into because some of us have had broken expectations when it comes to hope. That for some of us, it's just that when we trusted that something good was going to happen and something didn't, that it's hard to believe that there's any more hope. And I believe that just for us, it can be difficult to trust in something when it feels like, well, so many things in my life have gone bad. I know when I was in pre-marriage counseling with my wife, it was difficult for her because she had a really close friend when she was going through junior high and like those clunky, awkward years. And she had this like really good friend that just kind of carried her through those years. And when my wife was 14 years old, her best friend died of cancer on Christmas Day. Yeah, and it was just like, I remember her saying, like, I'm just skeptical to the good things in my life because so many of them have turned out bad. And maybe you've been there or you're there now where it just feels like whatever's good in your life just has like a dark cloud over it because you can't trust whether it's going to be good. And I believe when it comes to hope, a lot of us have trust issues. That it's hard to hope in something when we're like, I don't know. God, I don't know what you're doing here. But I believe this. I believe this morning especially, God is going to speak specifically to you and show you the hope that's already all around you. So you pray with me and we'll kind of get started here. Jesus, I thank you for this morning, God. I thank you that you do have a good hope for our life and that we get to trust and believe in you. And I just pray for each of us here, will you speak to our hearts, God? Let us just be able to hear your voice and know that you're for us. And for those of us who are just hopeless, God, give us a new hope and trust in you and your name, Lord. Amen. All right, let's go back a little bit because it's Christmas season and we got Christmas music up here. And how many of you guys just like absolutely love Christmas? Like Christmas, you're all, yeah. There was one gathering, people like stood up and cheered. I was like, I like you. I'm Christmas music. I'm starting in early October, more like September. I love decorations. I like got the tree up. I love it. I don't know if it's like, nostalgia or like whimsy, but the music, like the decorations, all of it, I love it. And I was sitting in a coffee shop earlier this week, And I'm sitting there, and I kind of had this funny moment where I was like looking around, and they've got the fireplace there with the stockings, and they've got this big, beautiful tree and garland, and it's just like all done up for Christmas. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, it's kind of crazy that we put up stuff that's all fake to look like a real thing for Christmas. Let me explain that. Because the fireplace that is in front of me is like one of just those like souped up space heaters. You know what I'm talking about? Like from Costco, where it's like this huge fireplace, but it's not real at all. And like the heat isn't even coming from the fireplace, it's like coming out the side of it. And it's got like this flame that kind of looks real, and these logs that like literally have embers like glowing. And I kid you not, there's a crackle. Like there's a crackle coming out of the fireplace. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, this is a total lie. Like this fireplace is not real. And they've got this big, beautiful tree that's made of plastic. And the garland's wrapping everything that's made of plastic. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, how crazy is it that we put up all these things that are to look or emulate like the real thing, but are all fake? It's all a facade. And I think sometimes that's what hope is like in our life. That we have this hope and we see it, but it's not a real hope. It's not what God has planned for us, that we put our trust in something that's an imitation of the real thing. And I believe that God has a hope for you that's so much bigger than anything that you can imagine, and that's what God has for you. And sometimes we get caught in just thinking that this is the best, this is the standard, this is the best I'll ever do. And God's like, no, that's not that. That hope is just an imitation of the real hope. Today we're going to talk about the places we put our hope. There's a couple places. I mean, one place I think of specifically is just like your job or your career, or even just like the place you work. Maybe it's your school where you go to school, like that's where you put your hope. Or for a lot of us, it's like a relationship, like there's a marriage. And if you put all of your hope on one person in a marriage or a relationship, that will absolutely crumble that person. Or maybe it's just like a someday attitude. Like, well, someday I'm going to have kids, and that's where my hope is. Or someday I'll actually be able to be financially stable, or have a retirement. Or someday I'm going to have things figured out. Or someday things will be better. And that's the place we put our hope. But I believe that the places we put our hope can place us in discontent. Let me say that again. The places we put our hope can place us in discontent. So if you're taking notes this morning, our big idea is coming up on the screen here. It's this. It's hope isn't a place, it's a person. Hope isn't a place, it's a person. It's kind of interesting. Modern psychology and psychologists would tell us that hope isn't just a feel-good emotion. So hope isn't just this emotion that like you feel good on the inside. Hope is actually a driving factor, and you're like a force in your life that can cause like bigger life achievements, and just like better success, and just like a better value of yourself. But it also goes the other way. So they would say that hopelessness actually tells your brain that it's insurmountable, that it's impossible, that you can't do it, that you're not good enough. And maybe like you've been, or you're in a season where you felt that spiral, that like hopelessness just starts to spin on itself, and you start to feel like you're not good enough. And it's like, it's desolate. But I believe that Paul, one of the early Christians, writers in the Bible, he actually talks about this in the book of Romans. It's coming up on the screen. It's Romans 5, 3-4. It says, we can rejoice too when we run into problems and trials, for we know that they help us develop endurance, and endurance develops strength of character, and character strengthens our confident hope of salvation. But did you guys catch that? That we have hope when we run into problems, that we actually get to rejoice, that we get to celebrate when we run into problems. When I run into problems, which is quite frequently, my first thought isn't like, yeah, my first thought is like, this is really difficult. This is really hard. But what the writer here is saying is that we actually get to rejoice. And I love that he says run into problems. I circled that in my Bible because I find myself like I don't walk into problems. I don't like stroll in them. I'm like smack dab, full sprint, like sliding glass door, smashing into problems. Like I run into problems, and I get this. that we actually get the hope of salvation, that we are, when we say yes to Jesus, we are citizens of heavens, that that God has this plan for our life, and we just get to follow him, and that's the hope that we have. That's the good news. So if you're following along in your Bible today, we are going to be in the book of John. We're in John 5, and I just want to point out a story that I think best describes the places we put our hope and the person we can put our hope into. So it's John 5. I'm going to read a little bit and then talk about it, so just kind of bear with me. John 5:1, it says, "Afterward, Jesus returned to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish holy days. Inside the city near the sheep gate was the pool of Bethesda." I've been just mutilating that word all morning. So if you're like, that's not how it's said, Brian, I'm sorry. With 5 covered porches. Crowds of sick people, blind, lame, and paralyzed, lay on the porches. One of the men lying there had been sick for 38 years. When Jesus saw him and knew he had been ill for a long time, he asked him, "Would you like to get well?" 38 years. I get impatient when I'm in the doctor's office for like over 7 minutes. 38 years. "I can't," the sick man said, "for I have no one to put me into the pool when the water bubbles up. Someone else always gets there ahead of me." Jesus told him, "Stand up, pick up your mat, and walk." Instantly, the man was healed. He rolled up his sleeping mat and began walking. But the miracle happened on the Sabbath. So the Jewish leaders objected. They said to the man who was cured, "You can't work on the Sabbath. The law doesn't allow you to carry that sleeping mat." But he replied, "The man who healed me told me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" "Who said such a thing as that?" they demanded. The man didn't know, for Jesus had disappeared into the crowd. But afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and told him, "Now you are well, so stop sinning or something even worse may happen to you." Then the man went and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who had healed him. So we've got this guy he's sitting by this pool, and they believe that if you were the first one who got in this pool, that you would be healed. And so he's waiting day in, day out to be healed. And maybe you felt that in your life, where you felt like you've been stuck in and day out, and you're like, I'm getting hopeless because I've just been waiting. And he's been there, and he's just like waiting to get in this pool. And Jesus shows up, and Jesus says, "Do you want to be made well?" Which seems like a pretty easy question to answer. He says, get up and walk. And you see that this man gets up, rolls up his mat. I think there's a lot going on kind of under the scenes here, and especially with the places we put our hope. And I think the story points out 2 places specifically we put our hope. So if you're taking notes on the left side of your page there, I want you to put the pool. Just write the pool, and then just like in the middle, just draw like a little line, and then on the other side you have the temple. Okay, there's these two places. At the start of the story, we have the pool and the temple. And I think these are places where people put their hope. The first is the pool. These people would come and they would wait to get into this water to be healed. And I think this is where like the world and our culture tells us to put our hope, is that there's this rat race and you got to get in it, and you got to do better, and you got to get there quicker, and you got to have more money and more things, and you got to be faster and better, and then you'll have hope. And then if you can do all that, then you'll have hope. And for a lot of us, we're like, I can't get there fast enough. I can't do it fast. I don't have enough money. I can't do it all right. I can't do it all perfect, and we feel hopeless. And on the other side, you have the temple. Now, the temple was kind of like the religious center, and you've got people there, and they say, hey, we're going to protect God's holiness, and grace isn't a gift. Grace isn't easy. Grace is actually really difficult, and our standard's here, and you're kind of right here. And it all starts to sound like it's a lot of work. I think for some of us, it's maybe why we've avoided church. It's because we showed up and we feel like, I'm not going to amount. I'm not good enough. Grace isn't a gift. And we just feel beat up. And right smack dab in the middle of the story, you have Jesus saying, hope isn't in this place. Hope is in the pool. Hope is in the temple. Hope is in me. And maybe this morning it's just like that's the message that God's sending to you, is like hope isn't in place. It's found in Jesus. Jesus says, I am the living water. Jesus says, I'm the living temple. Hope is in me. So if you're taking notes, I wrote down four quick things that I just noticed in the story. And the first one is this: hope is a choice. Hope is a choice. Jesus says, would you like to be made well? That word well there is kind of like it's scattered throughout the text. And it has like two meanings to it. The first is well, as in like, would you like to be physically healed? Like, do you want to be made better? The second, and I think it's important, is this, is the double meaning is, would you like to be restored? And that restored is like inside of who you are. And I think it's important to notice that because Jesus is, do you want to be made well? Jesus' restoration isn't just about you, but it's about all of creation. Jesus is saying, I'm going to heal this guy, but because I'm healing all of creation, and you get to be a part of God redeeming all of creation. That God is making all things new, and you get to be a part of that. I have a friend. His name's David. He might be in here, and we got to do a walk for water together yesterday. And David's got a really cool story because he moved here I think 4 or 5 months ago, and he's in the Navy, and just in a season in his life where I think he would say just a little bit discontent and restless, and kind of just carrying a lot of weight, and just like, God, I don't know where you have me, and kind of feeling like maybe lost some of the plan that God has for his life. And he moved here and didn't really know anybody, and he said he got invited to New Life, and he walked in this gym, he walked in those doors right there, and he said the minute he walked in, he knew God was doing something in his heart. The minute he walked in here, he knew God was doing something in his heart. He started to get plugged into a group and just people around him, and started coming on Sunday, started serving. He started serving with teenagers and youth, and just kind of getting plugged in. And yesterday he kind of made a big choice of hope. After Walk for Water, David's like, I want to get baptized. But he's in the Navy and kind of a buff dude, and he was like, I don't want just a little pool on a Sunday. So I think we got a picture coming up here. David got baptized in the Sound right there, and we walked out, and he's like, I want this to be, I want to remember this. And I was like, you're going to remember this. That's me, by the way, in the wetsuit there, because I'm like, I'm not that crazy, right? It is so cold. And just that moment where I got dunked under, and man, just saying yes to hope. Just saying, Jesus, I know you have a plan for my life, and I know that you're good, and I just want to say yes to that. And God's not just like, I just want to restore these couple things around you. I want to restore all of you from the inside out. I'm a reader. I love to read, and maybe some of you guys are readers, but I love to read. And when I read, I absolutely have to underline and highlight. Like, I'm reading a book, I've got to underline and highlight because it helps me remember like the things that I thought were important, the things that like stuck out to me specifically. And I'll go to a shelf and I'll pull a book down and I'll like look through for the yellow or the underlined and just reread some of the things that kind of like, wow, really meant a lot to me. And I was thinking about that with hope, because hope, it's so easy to kind of like in a fast-paced life to move past and get stuck in like the discouragement of the future, or what's got to happen tomorrow. And we forget the little hope that God has put all around us. Like just like David walking into the gym, it's like God is doing something in your heart right now. And what is it to underline or to highlight the hope in your life this week? For me, it's like social media. Like I want to share that picture. I want to be like, man, God is doing such incredible things in the life of his people. And I want to share it on Facebook. Or maybe for you, it's just like journaling first thing in the morning, that your attention is just like, you know what, God, here's 3 things that like I get to have hope in today. Or maybe it's like you physically take some pictures and you're like, all right, God, this is the hope that I have from you, and I'm going to put these as the lock screen on my phone, or I'm going to put these up in my office, or I'm putting them up on the wall, and these are the things that I realize, God, that you have given me these small hope in my life. I don't know what it is, but I know that God has specifically given you hope. The second thing I wrote down is this, is hope makes you move. Hope makes you move. I like this one because it kind of sounds like a song that would be on like my dad's iPod by Earth, Wind, and Fire. Hope makes you move, right? I like this one. But you look at the guy in the story, right? It's really easy for him to kind of start playing into this victim mentality. Like, Jesus, I can't. I can't get there. Like, everyone gets there faster than me. I don't know how you expect me to get into that water. And I think so often in my life, I look and I'm like, God, like they're better equipped. They can do it better than I can't even get there. I'm stuck. And I love that Jesus doesn't even acknowledge the other people. It's just between him and that guy. Because in my mind, I could read the story that like Jesus like picks him up and like throws him over his shoulder and he's like, you're getting in the water. Hurdles like all the sick people and like, boom, healed, right? Like got him. That's not what happens, right? It's just between Jesus and this guy. Jesus just looks at him, says, get up and walk. Get up and walk. The hope that God has for your life isn't dependent on anybody else. It's just between you and him. Just you and him, like an insole for a shoe. God has created you specifically for the hope that he has for you. Just between you and him. It's not dependent on anybody else. I love that this guy, there's a moment where he rolls up his mat. Because I believe this. I believe you have to roll up the old in your life before you can move on to the hope that God has for you. Before you can move on to the new that God has for you, you've got to roll up the old. That there are habits or there are things in your life that God's calling you to roll up and to stand up and to move forward into hope. And I don't know what it is. It could be an addiction to drugs or alcohol or just a habit that you have that God's saying this morning, I want you to roll that up and stand up and move on to something new, to a future I have for you. Or maybe it's just debt. And this moment right now, God is speaking to you and saying, roll up that mat, stand up and walk. You got to roll up the old before you can move on to the new. Maybe it's just an attitude. Maybe it's an attitude of just like victim or discontent or like I'm not good enough or like God, I'm so worried about the future. And this morning God's like, just roll it up. Just stand up. I have a future that's so good for you. I don't know what it is, but I believe that God has a story for you and he's already laid the groundwork for it. The third thing I wrote down is this, is hope leads to change. Jesus says, so stop sinning or something worse. It's interesting, the writers of the Bible, the scholars, they use this imagery a lot for sin of like a snare or like weeds that entangle or something that entangles our heart. I think about it like your earbuds or like your headphones. You ever put those things in like a purse or a workout bag? What are they made out of? They get like all sorts of like twisted, like double knotted. You're like, I just put them in there for a second and they're instantly like wrapped around themselves. Or you ever go look at what's behind your TV? Don't. It's like sailor knotted back there. You're like, I put these down here for a second and they've already like wound themselves up. You're like, how did all these, there's cords I didn't even put down here. What are they multiplying? It's crazy. But that's that's the sin that I think entangles and ensnares our heart, that gets caught up around. And so when Jesus says, stop sinning, when I first glance at it, it sounds kind of like a threat. Like, cut it out. Stop sinning. But when you really look at it, it's more like a God that so loves you, that so believes you, that moved into, that put on flesh and blood, moved into the neighborhood and is here for you and is just trying to untangle that mess. There's moments in the gospel where Jesus says to people, so stop sinning. Because he's saying, it's time to move forward. What does it mean for you to roll up your mat this morning? Say, okay, God, this is yours. I'm moving on. God has a new hope for you. I read this story a couple years ago of this woman. She lived in New York City, and her apartment kind of sat kitty corner to the downtown, and she could see she had a huge window in her living room, and she could see the World Trade Center and the towers. And she said that when 9/11 happened, there was just this cloud of hopelessness that sat over the city. It's like you could feel it. And then she'd look out this window, and where there was two towers, there was just an absence of. And maybe like you felt that hopelessness before, like where there was once a family member, there's now just an empty chair. Or maybe it was like once there was finances, there's now just an empty bank account. That once there was is now gone, and the absence of it, like it tears at your soul. And she said she would walk in her living room and she'd look out the window and she'd see this absence and she'd just start to weep. She said that there's this one afternoon, she bought these little wooden letters. It says, spelled out hope. She put it right on the windowsill there. And every day she'd walk in and she'd just look at the hope. Every day she'd walk in and she'd just focus her attention right there on the little letters, right in this gigantic window of this absence. She said day in and day out, just like it started to get a little bit bigger. It started to get a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. And just after a while, all she would notice is she'd go straight to the hope. She said, I don't know what it means, but I know there's hope here. Where is the little hope that God's given you? Somewhere specifically in your life, God's got something. He says, here's just a little hope. And just this depth, this void of absence of just hurt or regret, God says, here's a little hope. My question for you this morning is this, is how is your soul? Because because Jesus says to this man, he says, would you like to get well? And I believe that God's looking at you and he's like, I want to restore you from the inside out. Maybe you're like, I haven't even thought about my soul, or I've been moving so fast, and this morning's just a moment to say, all right, God, my soul feels unrest. And I just need a little bit of hope. I don't know what it is, but I know that God is making all things new, and he wants to restore you from the inside out. Fourth thing I wrote down is hope, the fourth thing I wrote down is you can hope again. You can hope again. My Father is always working, and so am I. You get to hope again. We get to move past the I can't. We get to move past the I don't feel like I'm good enough to being able to hope again. When I was a kid, I kind of grew up in a church that had these huge kind of cathedral stained glass windows. And they're beautiful, and they've got like depictions of just different Bible characters or apostles or stories. And I remember in the daylight, you could walk by the church on the outside, and you see these like big kind of colorful pieces of glass, and the sun would come down and reflect off the glass, and it was pretty, and it was great to look at. But at night, if you walk by the church, it was nothing. It was just dark. It was black. It was kind of just this black, big mass, and you couldn't see anything, and you couldn't see any of the colors, and you couldn't see any of the shapes or the textures, unless there was a light on in the inside of the church. If there was a light on in the inside of the church, the glass would shine with more color and more beauty than it did during the day, and it would shine out into the streets. And I believe that's what hope is like in our life. That when it's good and there's hope out in our circumstances, and you feel good and you've got things are going great, it looks fine. But when it's dark and there's a dark season of your soul and there's a storm and you feel like you're at a low, when you have a little bit of hope on the inside, it shines more beautiful than anything else. That's the hope that Jesus is talking about. It's just a little bit of hope that can carry you through, and that hope can shine to other people. And if you're a student, it's like your school is dark and there's no hope, and you get to be that one little hope that shines through. Or maybe it's your workplace, or it's your family, or it's your marriage, and you're like, I have this little bit of hope that's going to shine through more beautiful than anything else. I know it's dark, I know there's a storm, but there's a little bit of hope. I believe that this morning God has hope for you. I don't know where it is, but I encourage you, write it down on your note sheet, write it down when you get home, whatever it is. Where is God put hope in your life? It's not the pool. It's not the temple. It's not a place. It's a person. It's Jesus Christ. You say yes to Jesus, you are citizens of heaven. We get to have eternity with God forever, and we get to invite other people, and we get to be the hope that God has as a church. Will you stand and pray with me? God, I know that your plan is so much bigger than us. And God, each person here, those of us who have just felt hopeless or abandoned or just discouraged, God, will you just do a new work in our heart? God, will you restore? I pray for families right now specifically, God, families who have felt burdened or just stressed or, God, just disconnected. God, will you restore? Will you restore marriages this morning? This morning, will you just, God, touch the hearts of people in this room who are grieving? God, I pray that we can know that you do heal and you restore. And God, for this guy in the story, it wasn't just a spine and some ligaments you restored, but it was his whole being. It was his soul. So God, will you restore our souls this morning? Can we be more like you? Can we be challenged to be more like you? Because God, we know that you are good and you're for us. And can we trust again, God? Can we hope again? God, will this Christmas season look different because we get to be generous with the hope you've given us, that little hope inside of us. God, we get to be generous with it. God, I pray for dads in this room. Will you make them men after your own heart? God, for moms in this room, will you breathe them full of your life and your spirit? God, for students in this room, will you help them see the schools and their peers the way you see them? God, for single people in this room who just feel like the world is a lonely place, God, will you just put a church around them to comfort them? God, we love you and we thank you. We know that you are so good in your Lord. Amen. We continue in worship with me.